our time together. So just know that there's a camera in the back and it's turned on, and that's what's going on. I'm doing that for later on in case of inclement weather issues that might come up this winter and into the next semester. So just be aware that the camera's on and we're all being recorded. Okay, here goes the roll sheet. I'm going to start over here. I need y'all to work a little quicker today getting that through. So keep it moving. Don't let it get stalled. And then I'll be calling for it here in about 30 minutes. So let's get it moving quickly through the room. All right, take out your notes or your review guide, from last week. And let's turn to the lecture on universal spiritual needs. So we've got our lecture material for the first half of class, and then we'll take our break of probably right at 9 o'clock. When you come back, I'll have a DVD set up, and we're going to make application of what we talk about in the lecture portion to this DVD that we're going to show in the second half. And I'll ask you to I haven't decided. It depends on how much time we have. I may put you in small groups, or we may just do it as a large class. But be thinking about what we're talking about, because we're going to ask you to apply that to a dramatization. All right, so universal spiritual needs. Last week, we made an attempt to identify what our terms mean. We came up with characteristics for spirituality, characteristics for the term religion. So today, that takes us into the next step, which is talking about the needs spiritually that we all have. So there are 5 universal spiritual needs. To get to those, though, I want to begin with something that's probably pretty familiar. Does everybody recognize this hierarchy of needs from Abraham Maslow? Good. We're going to use that, lay a little foundation, and make a comparison between a psychological approach and a theological approach to talking about our human needs. So Maslow's theory was produced in 1943, was titled A Theory of Human Motivation. What I am interested in you knowing for testing purposes are these 5 terms. You do not have to replicate the whole pyramid in your notes. But for testing purposes, you want to know what the 5 terms of Maslow's theory are. So while you're writing this down, I just want to review them quickly. Maslow says that we are all born at a basic level where we are motivated by our physiological needs. Our need to breathe, our need to eat, our need for hydration, our need for sexual relations for procreative purposes, our need to sleep, our need for balance, our need to excrete our waste, just our basic physiological needs. We're born that way. That's what motivates us for a good portion of our life. We grow, we develop just based on those basic physiological needs that we have. For Maslow, the needs are foundational, so they build on one another. Once we move from that level, the next level that we get to is the level for safety. And at this point, this is when what concerns us most and what motivates us most is being safe and secure in our environment. We still feel safe about our bodies. We feel safe because we have employment and income to take care of our needs. We have resources to provide for ourselves. Excuse me. We feel safe because our families are secure. Our health is good. We have possessions and property, and all of that gives us a sense of safety and security. And that is what motivates us to grow, to develop, to do things, to be challenged. And once we get comfortable in that level, then we move up to the 3rd level for Maslow, which is love and belonging. And at this point, what really motivates us to develop individually as human beings are the relationships in our lives. So friendships, family relationships, and then sexually intimate relationships, where we feel unconditionally loved, unconditionally accepted by the people that we have a reciprocal love relationship with. Family, friends, and intimate connections. Maslow says that is the next level that motivates us to do things. Now, anecdotally speaking, I cannot prove any of this scientifically because Maslow's theory has never been tested using the scientific method. I referenced that, I think, last week, where the scientific method is you take a variable, you isolate it, you introduce another variable, and then you observe any changes that occur. That's the experimental scientific method. That's how, in the modern era, we know all the things that we know because we've proved it through the scientific protocol. This theory has never undergone that. It's never been validated that way. But in the 70, 75 years of its existence, there's been anecdotal evidence that has supported it throughout its development. So, anecdotally speaking, when we get to the level of love and belonging, this is where a large portion of our population gets very comfortable. And people get very satisfied when their basic physiological needs are met, they have food to eat, water to drink, a dry place to stay, they feel safe and secure because they have all the things they need to take care of themselves, and they have the relationships in their life that make them feel loved and accepted and connected. So they have discretionary time, discretionary money, they have people that love them, that they can spend time with, and for the most part, a good portion of our population gets very comfortable at that level. They're not interested in further development, in further growth. They are very satisfied just enjoying all the comforts of life. Now, there are groups of people, though, that continue to move on and up into Maslow's theory to the level of esteem. These are the people who are not just content with, okay, I got me and mine and I'm good to go. These are the people that need to feel esteemed by themselves, by others, and they need to have the respect and respect other people. So the fourth level in Maslow's theory is the level that we are motivated when we have value from others, when we feel like we have accomplished things and achieved things, when we have confidence in ourselves, when other people respect us, when we have, when we feel respect for other individuals. This level of esteem is what motivates us to do more and better and beyond what we had been doing. So these are the kind of people that they don't mind running for student body president in their high schools and colleges. These are the people that when they're out of school in their communities, they will run for the school board, or they will get into local politics. These are the people that eventually want to pursue leadership roles. They take leadership in their families, in their communities, in their churches, in their circle of friends. These are the people that motivates them. That's what drives them. And then the last level in Maslow's theory is that of self-actualization. For him, this was reserved for the most exceptional people in a given culture. So in his day, it would have been people like Albert Einstein or Eleanor Roosevelt. For us, it might be people, Mother Teresa comes to mind, maybe Maya Angelou, maybe one of our political leaders. Who knows about that? But there's the people that we would consider great in our culture today, the most exceptional people. Because these are the people that can deal with things in creative ways. They're able to problem solve. They can function and think without prejudice. They can divorce their feelings and act objectively. They can examine things factually. and look at things from a perspective of objectivity and neutrality in such a way that they can problem solve for the good of the whole. So these are exceptional people, and that's why they're at the top of the pyramid. Not everybody in Maslow's theory rises to that apex. But he does say that these build on each other. That you start at the physiological and you move up. Okay, so this gives us an idea from a psychological perspective what it is that motivates us based on the needs that we have. Let's look next at a spiritual approach or a theological approach and talk about 5 universal spiritual needs. Now, I'm going to put these up one at a time, and when I do, there's going to be a scripture reference to them. So the first universal spiritual need is that of transcendence. All of this comes from the Old Testament writings of Isaiah chapter 6. The chapter's only like 12, 14 verses long. So these 5 universal spiritual needs come out of Isaiah chapter 6. That is not testable material. I'm not going to ask you to repeat that, but I want you to know where I'm getting the information. If you want to go back and take a look and study that for yourselves, then you'll know where to go to find that. But it's not testable material. The 5 universal needs are testable material. The need for transcendence. There's a Catholic theologian named Augustine who defines or describes this need for transcendence by saying, "Thou hast made us for thyself, O Lord, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you." He's saying the idea of transcendence comes from our existence as human beings, that spiritually, when we are created, we're created with restless hearts. That we have this need to connect to something that's bigger and beyond ourselves. That goes to the etymological meaning of the word transcendence. So transcendence is comes from a Latin compound word. The root word is the Latin word sendo, which means movement. And then the prefix tells us what direction. So when we transcend something, we're moving in a certain direction. Anybody have an idea of what direction that might be? I think I heard somebody say through or beyond. So the prefix trans means to move through, to move beyond something. When we move up, what is the word that describes that? Ascend. When we ascend to the mountains, we're going up. When we're coming down from something, what are we doing? We descend. So all 3 of those words are related. They have to do with movement. You ascend, going up, you descend, coming down, and when you transcend, you move across, or you move beyond, or you move through. And the idea of the need for spiritual transcendence is to move through the limits of the physical world, or the boundaries of the physical world, to connect with the metaphysical world, that which is beyond what we know through the way that we know the world. Did we talk about that last week? How it is that we know and can experience the world around us? Did I ask you that question? Evidently not. How do you know the world around you? How do you experience the physical world that you're in right now? Through one of your senses. So you either hear it, see it, taste it, touch it, or smell it. That's the physical world. Spiritually speaking, Augustine is saying that we're born in the limitations or the boundaries of the physical world that we only know through our senses, but we have this innate need to move beyond it, to move through it, to transcend and to connect to that which is beyond what we can know empirically. From a biblical perspective or theological perspective, from a Christian theological perspective, we would say that the need for transcendence is met through God's activity. And there are three typical ways that God meets that need for us: through nature, through history, and through the makeup of human beings. So we know, or God attempts to connect to mankind through the simple fact that nature exists. The scriptures say in Psalm 19 that the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows his handiwork. Just the mere fact that the trees exist, the sun exists, the moon and the stars, the seasons change, just walking outside and physically experiencing nature is evidence from the Christian perspective that God is transcending the spiritual world to connect to mankind in the physical world. He also, the scriptures also go on to say in the book of Romans that the invisible things from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, being understood by humanity, even God's eternal power and Godhead, so that men and women are without excuse. So the mere fact that nature exists is evidence and testimony of God's existence and the fact that he transcends the limits of the physical world to connect to mankind. Historically, when we look at how God has worked through the history of his people, through the history of the church, through the history of our nations around the world, and even through our own family and personal history, we can see patterns. We can see things develop that we should learn from. The old adage, I'm sure you've heard, be careful about watching what goes on in history because history repeats itself. There's nothing new under the sun is another scripture, Christian scripture that supports that. That we find ourselves in our human existence just repeating these cycles over and over. And it began, from the Christian perspective, in the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve were born in a state of pristine perfection and enjoyed all of the blessings of the garden, but they decided to go their own way. What's that word? Say that again? Yeah, they veered, they disobeyed God's commands. God said, don't eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They disobeyed, they ate of that. And when they did, then they were banished from God's presence, from the relationship. So they went off on their own way. They were confronted because of their disobedience, and they had a choice. They either repent and come back into fellowship with God, or they continue off on their own way. And when you repent, the cycle starts over. When you continue off in your own way, you go off and you start the cycle in another era or another area. So you have this cycle that just keeps going on. We are in relationship with God, we disobey, we do our own thing, we're confronted, we either repent and get back into fellowship, or we go off on our own and just continue in our own patterns. If we come back, then we enjoy the blessings and the goodness of God, and we just continue on that pattern. You see that throughout the entire Christian scriptures. When it talks about God's people, we can see that in the history of the church, from the time Jesus ascended until now. You can see how that pattern has worked itself out. You can see that in your own lives. You've all lived long enough that you kind of know, why do I always find myself in this place? I always seem to be attracted to the same kind of person, and my relationships always seem to end up the same kind of way. Why is that? Because we have these patterns, and that is evidence that God is working in history. And then thirdly is just the simple fact of our existence as human beings. We are minerals and the essence of who we are. We're physical matter. But God has put us together in such a way that we are uniquely created to think, to have personality, to interact, to have relationship. We are wonderfully complex beings. And that is evidence that something, somewhere, had to create us. We didn't just pop up out of nowhere. So the fact that we exist, that we can see God working in history, and just the mere existence of nature is evidence that God has transcended the limits of the physical world and has connected with mankind. Number 2 is the universal spiritual need of love and relationship. So this is similar to Maslow's love and belonging stage. Maslow says we all have this need to be loved, to reciprocate love. The universal spiritual needs from the scriptures also say everyone is born with this need to give love, receive love, and be in relationship with others. Another Catholic theologian, Teilhard de Chardin, tries to describe that universal need this way. He says, someday, after we have mastered the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we shall harness for God the energies of love. Then, for the second time in the history of the world, man will have discovered fire. Chardin equates the need we have for love and relationship to the discovery of fire. Can anybody connect those dots for us? How are those two things related? Okay, let's go back to what it was like before fire existed. Somebody said warmth. So before we had fire, we were cold, right? We didn't have a good way of keeping ourselves warm. What else characterized life for mankind at that time? It was dark. And so they had limited time during the day to be productive, to gather food, to keep their sustenance going. What else? What about their food supply? Yeah, it's pretty limited. I mean, they were eating what they could pick, berries and nuts, and it was pretty much trial and error. And if something was poisonous, they didn't know it until somebody died. And then what about predatory animals? They were being attacked. Did they have much weaponry to defend themselves? Literally sticks and stones. But then fire was invented, or happened, or was discovered. I always imagine what it was like that day that, I mean, somebody's just walking around gathering nuts and berries, and maybe there's some dead leaves, there's some dead grass, and there's a crystal, and it's a really bright sunny day, and the sun hits it just right, and, you know, everything combusts and fire starts. We don't really know how it happened, but we have fire now, so we know that it did. And when that occurred, what changed about those 4 things we just mentioned? How did mankind's life change with the advent of fire? It did for the better, but in those 4 ways, how was it better? So their diet expanded greatly. They went from just nuts and berries now to greater sources of protein. They went from being cold to extending their lifespan because they could keep warmer longer during the winter months. They also extended their days because they had a source of light where they could be productive for longer periods. And they had another weapon that they could ward off predatory animals. So literally, the invention of fire, or the discovery of fire, transformed the way mankind lived. Chardin's quote is trying to make that connection, that we shall harness for God the energies of love, because that will be transforming. He says, whenever we connect with another human being and feel that love and relationship with them, it transforms the way we live. It transforms the way we think. For those of you in the room who have that kind of relationship where you have met the person that you know you're going to spend the rest of your life with, either you're planning to, or you are married, or you're committed to one another. Maybe it's a child, maybe it's another individual. But you have a relationship now where you know this person is who you're going to be with for the rest of your life. You don't think the same way anymore. It's no longer I and me. It's now us and we. There's not a decision you make that you do not consider this other person. You don't do things, go places without letting them know where you are. You keep up with this person. This person is on your mind all the time. It transforms the way that we live. And that's what Chardin is saying. Love and relationship in our lives transforms us. And it's a need that we all have that motivates us to interact with people and to be out in public because we want to be connected with other people. There are 3 ways that this need is typically met. Through touch, presence, and the acknowledgement of personhood. For you as nurses, all 3 of these are very significant ways for you to minister to your patients as you are caring for them physically. The ministry of touch is a very powerful way to express love and relationship to your patients. They have that need. And when you walk in and you touch them in an appropriate way, squeeze them on the hand, pat them on the shoulder, that expresses a connection with another human being. There's a human connection that takes place. And when you do that as a healthcare professional, what you're communicating to that patient is, you're not alone. It's okay. I'm here with you. I'm going to walk you through this. I'm going to take care of you. You're going to be okay. The mere fact that we walk in and we touch people helps them feel safe, helps them feel secure, lets them know that they're in relationship with us for that time, and it means something to them. The second way that we do that is merely through our presence. You're all required to wear your blue scrubs. And when you get out and wherever you're working, you're going to have your dress code that you're required to wear. That identifies you. It may be your first day on the job, wherever you choose to work, and you may be nervous as all get out. And you're just a little anxious because this is your first day. Now you're a real live nurse. You've graduated, you passed your NCLEX, and here you are. People are counting on you, and this is your first day, and you've got to really perform. And you've got a patient, and their IV is going off, and it's buzzing and beeping. And you walk into the room, and all you have to do on your very first day is just walk into the room, and the family and the patient, in their minds, go, woo, thank goodness. Somebody who knows what to do is here and can help us. It's your first day. They don't know that. They don't know that you're nervous and scared, but all you do is walk in. They identified you as the nurse. You're somebody who's in the know, and you can make things better for us because you know how to make this machine quit buzzing, and it's driving us crazy. All you have to do is show up. In your personal lives with family and friends, now that you're in the medical field, when tragedy strikes and you show up, your family feels more safe. Your friends feel more secure. Because at the very least, you understand the language, you understand the vocabulary, you understand what's going on in the hospital setting or system. You kind of know the ropes. People outside of that don't know how it works. So when they've got a family member who is in healthcare, that makes them feel safe and secure. Also, you'll probably find, if you haven't already, that your family is going to start relying upon you to answer all their healthcare needs. You're a freshman in nursing school. Some of you are just doing your gen eds, but you may be getting this sometime soon as well. You're going to start getting these calls that say, hey, I've got this pain in my side. Do you have any idea what it might be? Are you getting that yet? Already, yeah. Because you're in nursing school, of course you should know the answers to these questions. That is because you represent someone who is in the know, and just merely your presence speaks to that need for a loving relationship in the lives of your family and friends and your patients. All right, universal spiritual need number 3 is forgiveness. We all have the need at times in our lives to ask for forgiveness. And there are times when people will come to us and they'll ask us to forgive them. And the need is reciprocated. We need to forgive people who have wronged us, and we need to ask for forgiveness when we've wronged others. It is a universal need, because when we harbor unforgiveness in our lives, it can lead to a lot of very negative emotional conditions. And eventually, those emotional conditions can start to have effect on our physical being. There is a psychologist, Everett Worthington, who describes this need for forgiveness like this. He says that forgiveness helps us to remember things differently. When we ask for forgiveness, when we grant forgiveness, it's not that we are just forgetting everything that happened to us that was painful and hurtful, but what we do when we genuinely forgive, when we've been wronged, is we don't allow the power of our unforgiveness, our anger, our hatred to have control over us. We don't allow the negative emotional condition to control and overpower us. Genuine forgiveness helps us let go of that, but it also allows us to remember what happened so that we can be wiser in the future. And we can make other choices and other decisions in the future that may not be as hurtful or as harmful. You've probably all heard it said, and may have even said it yourself. Yeah, I can forgive old so-and-so for what he did to me, but I'm not ever going to forget it. And the truth is, you won't ever forget it. When you have been seriously, deeply, emotionally injured, we don't forget those things. They don't just go away. In actuality, that's really not a healthy thing. But what is healthy is to experience forgiveness so that it doesn't have control and power on your everyday aspect of your life. So that too is one of our universal spiritual needs. Number 4 is that of hope. We all have the need for hope. Now, I'm talking about hope that's different from, I hope I get a good parking spot at campus today, or I hope they still have pizza when I go to the Snacks Cafe for lunch, or I hope I do really good on my test. That's more like wishful thinking. But I want to give you a biblical definition for hope, and I want you to write this in your notes. I didn't put extra space for it, but this is really short. So just write next to that word hope this: a confident expectation. A biblical definition for hope is a confident expectation. And that is a need that we all have. We need to have something to hope in. We need to have something to ground our hope and our desires in that will motivate us to continue on in difficult circumstances. At this point, I want to give you a word of caution, a word of warning about this universal need in the lives of our patients. When you get into the profession, you will find that some people's hope seems a little outrageous, because on this side of healthcare, you have greater knowledge. You know what the test results say. You know what the test results mean. You know what the doctor is saying. The family doesn't understand all that. They can get the information from the doctors, but they don't always comprehend it. They don't always get it. And sometimes they just flat out deny it because they can't accept the fact that their loved one is sick and or dying. When you get out into the field and into the profession, it will never be our place to take someone's hope away, no matter how unreasonable or how outrageous you think that might be. For example, you have a patient, you know they're terminally ill, and all the signs are there that likely their life is going to end in just a few weeks. And you're in the room and you hear the family saying, now Mama, you just hang on there because Christmas is coming in a couple of months and we're going to get you better and home in time so we can have a big old family celebration. Or spring is just around the corner and we know you want to get out there in that garden and plant those vegetables. So we're going to make sure you get your garden this year. And you're listening to that and you know this family is not clued in. They don't really know what's going on because the patient is dying and they have not accepted it yet. It's never our place to pull that family aside and say, now listen, here's the deal, here's the real deal, here's the truth. You need to know this. It's not our place to impose the truth and the reality of what's going on in their loved one's life, because sometimes an individual's hope may not seem reasonable to us, but it is what helps that individual cope with very difficult circumstances. If they need to think that their mother or dad or loved one is going to get better and they're going to recover, even though you know that's highly unlikely, if that's where their hope is, then we need to allow them to have that hope. Because hope is a powerful need that motivates us and keeps us going. And unfortunately, you will see that in your professional life played out, depending on what kind of clinical setting you work in ways that you'll be tempted to say, okay, now, I really need to let you know the truth here. But just remember, whatever people need to hope in, let them have it. And then lastly, is our universal spiritual need for meaning and purpose. We all want to know that our life has meaning, that we have a reason for being.